Hi there, Damien here from the other side, wishing you and your family a happy new year. We're back for 2025 on January 24th. Until then, we're presenting our best segments from last year and hope you enjoy this one. Australia, we have a problem, a billion-dollar problem. Our national broadcaster has become a joke. Once the standard bearer for high-quality journalism, non-commercial, in-depth reporting and current affairs debate and quality in broadcasting style, imposing a little class and setting the tone for the way Australian English should be spoken, the ABC has, in the past 2 decades, become a laughingstock and a shell of its former self. And the truth became a little more exposed this week when the Australian's media editor, Sophie Ellsworth, attended a literary festival in Sydney at which the ABC's most senior political editor of its flagship show, The 7:30 Report, was caught speaking a little too freely about her views on our country.
We are a racist country, let's face it, we always have been, and it's very depressing, but to give a licence like that I find profoundly depressing and a terrible prospect for the next election.
Now, everyone has been freaking out this week about the first part of that comment, that she called Australia a racist country. That is an entirely absurd notion. We're one of the world's most welcoming and safe multicultural countries. The average Australian is far from racist. In fact, we're so not a racist country that we're sometimes too welcoming of those who don't accept our basic values and norms. But that's another story. All that first statement shows is how grossly out of touch Laura Tingle is with the people that she's supposed to serve as a public servant, and maybe how grossly out of touch she is with reality itself. It certainly demonstrates that she's not fit for a senior government role that demands objectivity and detachment. What worries me more is the second part of the statement, where she says, "But to give licence like that, I find profoundly depressing." What she's talking about there is Peter Dutton. Laura Tingle is running a narrative at the moment in her commentary in what some have said might actually be a completely unacceptable level of direct political campaigning on our ABC. She has decided that Peter Dutton and the coalition calling for a sensible reduction in immigration levels is giving licence to racists. So we can't talk about immigration or say we should possibly reduce our immigration from 1 million in 18 months to a more sensible level. Otherwise we're racists. Seriously? Then she says at the end, it's, quote, a terrible prospect for the next election. By terrible prospect, she means Labor might lose. So how did we get to the point where we have the senior political editor at the flagship show on the national broadcaster thinking it's okay to be so openly biased at a major public event like the Sydney Writers' Festival? I mean, the festival is the annual Festival of Lovies. I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that everyone in that audience was probably happy to applaud her. You could just run the Labor Party conference right on after the Writers' Festival and people could just use the same tickets to attend both events. Although there'd be a few Greens there too, probably, at least the ones who can read books. Anyway, I digress. This appearance followed on from these comments that Tingle made about Peter Dutton's migration statements the weekend before last, just after the federal budget had been handed down. She went on the Boring Journalists panel on ABC's Sunday Morning Insiders show, sitting alongside David Spears and distant cousin Phil.
And it's also the case that the economy has basically been kept its head above water because of migration. So suddenly we're deciding, we don't want this at a time when the economy is still, barely.
A lot of people resent that, don't they? You listen to any focus group, you listen to any talkback radio, you'll hear concern about migration, concern that the budget's propped up by it.
You will, but I think what was concerning is for a political leader to come out and say not only is housing the fault of migrants, but you can't get a childcare space, you can't get through the traffic on the roads, you can't get in to see the doctor because of migration. That is lighting this thing up in a really disturbing way, regardless of the arguments about whether there should be more or less migration, regardless of whether his policies make sense, and I would say that they don't make coherent sense in what he's put out in his budget reply. The hot buttons he's pressing there, I think, are very dangerous for our community.
Laura Tingle on Insiders a couple of weeks back. Now, let me be clear. I completely disagree with what she's saying there, and I'll get into that in another episode. But I would defend her right to say it if she was doing it on her own dime and time. If she'd started her own podcast like we did with The Other Side 3 years ago, if she worked for a commercial media outlet in a free market. But she works for the ABC, and she's supposed to be an unbiased, or as unbiased as possible, political editor. I mean, you could give her a show on the ABC and say, this is the left-wing show, and then give me a show alongside her and say, this is the right-wing show, and then she could be a commentator. Then the ABC would be being fair and transparent within its charter. But she can't do that sort of blatant campaigning and call herself a political editor on the flagship show. And just to be clear, I do not want a job at the ABC, thanks. I think 90% of the ABC should be shut down and money refunded to taxpayers to spend on media that they want to watch. The thing people forget about the ABC is that it's a massive roadblock, a barrier to entry, as they say in economics, for any competitors like us to start up. It's anti-competitive and it should be reviewed by the ACCC. Why? Because it makes it almost impossible for anyone to start a competitive business. The ABC doesn't have to run ads to make any money. Commercial media does. So right away, we are at a huge disadvantage. That's not good. Let me tell you a little story. When I worked at the ABC briefly in the late 1980s, there were a lot of radicals and pseudo-academic types who hovered about, mainly connected to Triple J, the youth radio network, and also in the general newsrooms, working as young journalists fresh out of our left-wing indoctrination at our universities at the hands of hippie baby boomer academics left over from the 1960s. We know how the world worked. Well, we knew how the world worked, we thought, and we were set to fix it.
A big day in radio right across Australia. The day that Triple J links up with Melbourne from Sydney and soon right around Australia. That's right, radio that bites, jumping out of your radio. And right here we have the Minister for Rock and Roll Radio. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Ralph Willis, the Minister for Transport and Communications, with responsibility for the ABC and the allocation of radio.
Give them an inch, they take a mile. What have they got that commercial radio ain't?
Music, real music.
Right. Music of the people.
Well, it offers a wide range of music compared to most radio stations.
Does it? Well, thank you.
Well, those set programs, and there's lots of alternative music.
Would you like to be a radio announcer, do you think?
I don't know. Actually, I want to get into medicine.
It's original. Has it changed your life? Incredibly. Has it been like the second coming for you?
Been like the first.
Is this better than church?
Yeah. Any day. Yeah, let's keep guys here.
Right, and that's definitely better than church.
Ah, good old Tanya Lacey. Those were the days back in the 80s. Anyway, most young ABC employees capable of getting a better job elsewhere grew up and left. But being unemployable outside the taxpayer-funded cocoon that they'd built for themselves, the most radical stayed. Now, in the old days, our spoilt brat hubris was kept in check by an older war generation of leaders who still held to the traditional British-influenced BBC standards of the ABC as a standard bearer of class and culture. But as they left for retirement, that had to all be torn down. There could be no hierarchies, no standards to reach for. Everyone must be equal, especially those from the deemed minority classes who were elevated and promoted above their abilities. Some people were really more equal than others, and Marxist identity politics was in at the ABC. And as the older generation died out and the most radical of the radical leftovers from the Triple J era aged ungracefully into new jobs on metro radio and TV or into management, the ABC culture shifted with them, and it shifted radically left. The ABC continue to hire and promote from within, and only those who clearly fit into the defined culture can get past the first round of job interviews as an outsider. And so it's not surprising that we now have an ABC almost exclusively inhabited by a monoculture of people who all view the world in one way, and that the ABC has descended into being not a national broadcaster for all, but a closed shop club for radicals bludgeoning off productive taxpayers with zero accountability to the marketplace whatsoever. The radio ratings are now abysmal, and television isn't far behind. We get one point of view on most shows, and their idea of diversity of opinion is allowing a centre-left Liberal politician to come on panel shows every now and again to be jeered and mocked and laughed at by studio audiences. Which is all great if you're among the 20 to 30% of Australians who share these political views. Hooray for you. You get a free broadcasting network paid for by the other 70 to 80% of Australians who can't bear to turn the thing on. For some time on this show now, I've expressed concern about a number of women in high-profile on-air and editorial positions at the ABC who hold quite radical political views and are quite sexist against men, and they're far from the mainstream of Australia, being given platforms to use for their private posturing at our expense, like Pat Carvelis.
We really need to interrogate the complex history of gender discrimination, and the library rightly tries to build representation of female voices, but we must equally ask the question, are we elevating all women? Are we elevating the stories of women who are not white, who are not straight, who are not able-bodied? Are we?
Yes, I ask myself that question every morning when I wake up, right before I spend my days working like a dog to pay the tax that pays her fat salary. As I said, if the ABC was a private organisation like this show, which one day might actually make some money, I desperately hope, or like our newspapers or commercial TV or radio, then I'd be falling over myself for these radical women to have the right to express whatever nutty Marxist, sexist views they want. But the ABC is taxpayer funded, which means that under the threat of violent imprisonment, you and I are forced to pay for it. And that, in my humble opinion, is immoral and unethical in the extreme. Now, there's one complicating factor with all of this. Tingle was very recently, just weeks ago, appointed as the staff representative on the ABC board. And ABC board members have had emergency discussions and meetings this week over Tingle's comments, according to The Australian. The next scheduled board meeting is in June, but it may need to be brought forward. No doubt Ms. Tingle will have to recuse herself from the discussions. As well as the latest scandal, they'll also need to look at bias against Israel in their coverage of the Gaza war, after an ABC social media post said that Hamas had, quote, made a show of resilience against Israel. Ah yes, the ABC supporting the brave terrorists of Hamas there. It's time for some adults to return to the room at the ABC and clean their act up. Otherwise, it's high time that we reviewed the need for this organisation and this massive public expense in the internet age. I can think of many better ways Australia could spend $1.2 billion. If you enjoyed that clip, check out our website at othersidetv.com.au and sign up to join us in our 2025 mission to revolutionise Australian media. We're back with brand new content from Friday, January 24. There is a better way to view life than thinking that we're all victims who need big government to save us. Check us out, othersidetv.com.au. Here at The Other Side, we do not get more than $1 billion of taxpayer money like the ABC does to waste on fun stuff that we and our friends like while ignoring the public that we're supposed to serve. We have to rely on your support of this show. But I also hate asking for charity. So we've done a deal with what I think is the best VPN service in the world so that you can support this show and get excellent value for yourself in return. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route all your data through a different server location so that you can't be tracked by the prying eyes of big government and big corporations. It keeps you and your family truly safe, and it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN, is quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that's pretty much it. You can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. Unbelievable. That is a whopping 83% off the normal price, and you'll get the first 4 months free, and you will be helping our show a lot. So get onto it, piavpn.com/otherside to get the special deal. And get this, if you've got a Netflix account, by signing on through a server in another country to Netflix, like the US, for example, you'll get access to that country's library of Netflix shows on your account as if you were in that country, which is also great if you want Netflix in a different language or something. piavpn.com/otherside.